You're looking at the new DS4 E-Tense, which is a hybrid model that faces cars like the Audi Q3 and even the Cupra Formentor. Now this car comes packed with features, but there are three which I think could make it a winner in this class. We're going to run through them in this video. Now the first thing you might have already noticed is the design of this thing. It's so different to anything else in the class. It's typically DS. And look at the details. In this taillight alone, we've got this triangular pattern with some chrome effect stuff. It looks very unique and I think pretty nice, especially against this pearl paint job. Now we've got 20-inch wheels as an option on this car, but we're currently running 19s, which bodes well because look, we've got some squidgy tyre wall on there. And as you can see, the shape of this car is kind of like a hatchback riding a little bit taller than normal. It looks different to the SUV forms of other cars. As you can see on the nose, we've got a very unique LED design pattern. It's typically DS, and I think the same can be said for that front grille. There is no mistaking what brand this car comes from. Compared to the slightly more pragmatic designs on the German cars from the Audi Q3 to the BMW X2, for example, this thing definitely has its own thing going on. But those cars are known for their driving abilities, so let's see how this thing holds up on the road. Now this new DS4 E-Tense, as its name suggests, is running a hybrid power plant. It mixes a 1.6 litre turbocharged petrol engine with a battery pack of 12.4 kilowatt hours. If you don't know what that means, just know it's fairly small, but it's enough to power an electric motor to assist that petrol engine. So that will give you a claimed 38.5 miles of usable electric range, which is pretty good going actually. Only a couple of years ago we were saying 20, 22. Now we're nudging 40 miles when it comes to claimed range. And when this thing was fully charged and when we jumped in it, it was saying 35, despite the fact that it's quite chilly today. So it should give most people enough to manage their daily commuter distances. So when you've got longer journeys, you have got that petrol engine to lean into, and combined, this power plant will produce 225 horsepower and 360 newton meters of torque, which is a lot of muscle. So much so that now we're on a twisty road, I can demonstrate just how effortlessly this thing picks up from low speed. If I allow it to slow down, we're just running now fully in electric mode, but if I click it into hybrid mode, put my foot down, initially it's quite sluggish to respond, but then you get a real kick of electric oomph, and then once the gearbox sorts itself out, it is a little bit hesitant, the gearbox. It does feel pretty nippy, and the spec sheets say it will do 0 to 62 in 7.7 seconds. I fully believe that. So there's good performance on hand, but what this car is really about, and what DS as a brand is more about, is luxury and comfort. And that's where the second element I think that is key to this car's success can come in, because this machine comes with a camera system on the windscreen which communicates directly with the suspension, and it will adapt the suspension to the road ahead. So it's looking and scanning the surface ahead. So if you come up against potholes, bumps or drain covers, it will soften the suspension off, and if it notices the road is quite smooth, well, it will stiffen it up. Now handily we're on a B road, so if I just run onto the cat's eyes here, it's really smooth. It's very, very comfortable. We're not on the biggest wheels available in this car. It has 19-inch wheels on this rather than the optional 20s. So there is a bit of tyre will give, but I can sense the suspension is doing a really good job. Let me just throw it over these holes on the edge here. Just irons them out. It's very comfortable. And that comfortable ride really does feel right for this car. Whereas, say, the BMWs and the Audis, and certainly the Cupra Formentor, they want to be sporty. This thing doesn't, although it is going around that corner pretty well. It does have a lot of grip, and because you've got that electric oomph flow down, it pulls out quite nicely. There's good grip as well, I can feel from the driven wheels. But ultimately, this thing is just very light and easy to drive. I mean, the steering is really light. There's no steering feel whatsoever. The brakes as well. Now on hybrid cars, we know can sometimes feel a little bit unnatural, sometimes a bit squidgy, like you're putting your foot on a volleyball. But actually the pedal pressure on this is nice. It's nice and easy to regulate. The brakes feel strong, and it's just feels quite natural. I know there's a lot of stuff going on, and the one area I can feel that there's a lot of stuff going on in terms of juggling petrol and electric power is in the way the gearbox just is a bit hesitant with kickdown. It sort of leans into the electric torque, and then when the petrol engine has to take over under power, it feels like the gearbox isn't quite where you want it to be. If you drive it at a medium pace, which most people are going to do, the car does feel actually nice and cohesive. The engine, the electric motor, and everything else in the car does feel nicely matched and nicely judged. And actually round bends, it's pretty good. I mean, it does roll a little bit, but nothing too substantial. And yet you hit these bumps and it will just iron them out. I mean, there's some proper potholes here. I'm gonna go over one, just ironed it out. Yeah, nice and flat. So it's doing a very good job of keeping the car under control, smoothing out a rubbish road, and not being rubbish in the corners, which is pretty tough feat these days. That said, obviously this DS comes packed with equipment to make driving much easier. If you don't fancy doing too much heavy lifting, you've got a lot of driver assistance features on this car. I can feel the wheel tugging at my hands because it's trying to keep me in the center of the lane, and obviously as I verge onto the white line a bit, the steering assistance features, which you can turn off, but they're on by default at the start, or they're there to keep you center in the lane. And you've also got adaptive cruise control, we've got emergency braking systems as well. And my God, that went around that corner pretty well. Those who want something different from the usual choices, normally from Germany of course, are probably going to see much to like in this car when it comes to design and on the road. There is enough of a difference from those other models. But I think we should talk about the interior, because potentially that's going to be the thing to win you over. Now, while some of the buttons and some features in the interior are shared with other brands from the Stellantis group, I'm seeing bits of Citroën and Peugeot down here in particular, there are many unique things in this cabin, and I actually think many buyers will probably be drawn to this car because of the interior. Firstly, the layout and the dash is just really nice. Aesthetically, it looks great, and while there are some buttons and things, everything's really tidy and it's quite minimalist. We've got a couple of screens, it's all the usual stuff, digital instrument cluster, digital infotainment system here. This has loads of graphics on it, lots of information, and your infotainment system here, while it's not the quickest to use, is actually pretty decent and it reacts nice and quickly. It's a smartphone-like reactivity, and crucially, you've got a home button up here, so if you find yourself lost in the menus, click that. And crucially, you've got buttons over here which shortcut you to things like your climate control. Now, because this car has an electric handbrake and the gear selector down here is really tightly compacted, it means you've got some space in the middle for another screen. So there's actually 3 screens up front, and this screen is basically a touchpad where you can type things in or you can enter letters. So if I go onto the nav and I search for a location, instead of using the touchscreen, which I can use up here, I can just type in on this here. So I can type in with the letters, which is quite gimmicky, but actually as you're driving along, if I try and do stuff without looking at the screen, actually this is going to be really, really useful. How many times do you find yourself going like this when you're pressing buttons? This, you can just do it without looking, so that's very effective. And another cool feature is that the head-up display is actually beamed directly onto the windscreen rather than on a separate screen, so it's really crisp and clear and directly in your line of sight. Elsewhere in the interior, I really like the fact that we've got lots of storage space, bits down here, loads in here, big cubby holes down here, and generally speaking, it feels nice and airy. Now, this car is the hatchback version, not the crossover, so you sit quite low in the car. You can raise the seat, but if you sit low, you've got a lot of glass around you. It does feel nice and airy. Now, in the back, this is where the car feels most like a hatchback and least like a crossover. Everywhere else, it feels like you're driving something that's kind of between the hatchback and SUV world. But in here, because of the lower roofline and because the legroom in front of me isn't excellent, well, this is where it starts to feel much more like a hatchback, a lot more like a BMW 1 Series, for example, or a Mercedes A-Class. There's not tons of space for me to tuck my feet under the seat ahead of me, so I am a little bit cramped. You can see the angle of my knees here, although there is good knee space here, and there's quite a lot of space above my head as well. Not tons to the side, but quite a lot above me. And actually these seats are lovely. And in this Rivoli trim, you do get full leather in the rear as well as in the front. So it does feel quite plush, although when it comes to actual kit and tech, yeah, it's pretty hatchback and simple, because you've got basically 2 vents, a couple of USB-C ports down here to go with the ones you've got up front. This, obviously being the hybrid model, doesn't have as much space as the normal and much cheaper petrol model, but it's still got a bit of underfloor storage under here. You can put some bits and bobs in there, I guess, and there is some space for your charge cables to squeeze under there. But otherwise, you've just got basically a hatchback-sized boot, which, as I'll demonstrate with our suitcase, isn't bad. I mean, this goes in, no problem, loads of space around it for other stuff, so it's pretty good. I guess it's kind of normal as a boot space, and because it's a hybrid, of course, you know, everything in this class doesn't have much in the way of underfloor storage, so not bad at all. Although I have to say, being up front is definitely the best place in this car. It feels really plush, and I love that dashboard and the way the interior works so nicely, the digital tech, and then obviously the car rides lovely as well. It's a really nice place to be. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below, and of course, if you enjoyed the video, click the thumbs up button, and if you haven't already, let's get subscribing. We're back with many more cars very soon.